produit nouveau à Minneapolis, Tempo Afrique Travel. Vous voulez voyager? Achetez vos billets d'avion à l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, pas de problème de connexion, pas de problème de transfert de vol. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, c'est le voyage en toute tranquillité, en toute beauté, de votre maison jusqu'à votre destination. Votre satisfaction est notre plaisir.
Bonjour ou bonsoir, selon les endroits où vous nous captez en ce moment. Aujourd'hui, je vous amène encore un autre numéro très intéressant, mais ce numéro sera fait en anglais parce que mon invité, c'est un anglophone. Vous êtes dans l'émission Afrique et Développement et présentée par Kisongo Mbeleulu. Et aujourd'hui, nous allons discuter d'un thème intitulé « Développement économique, débat sur l'esprit du capitalisme ». Je voudrais rassurer mes auditeurs francophones qu'à la fin de l'émission, je viendrai en français avec l'essentiel de notre conversation ou de notre débat. Alors, supportez parce que nous allons faire le débat en anglais. Et à la fin, il y aura un petit résumé sur cela. Alors, I want to welcome everyone who is watching at this moment. Depending on the time, I can say good morning or good evening. So you are very welcome in this show. And the show is Africa and Development. Today, we have a topic that we are going to discuss on. The topic is economic development, the debate about the spirit of capitalism. And as you know, I'm not alone in the studio. I do have my guest. The guest is Samuel Zalanga, Professor Samuel Zalanga. I think he is no longer someone to introduce to you because he has been in this show for almost 2 times. Now it's the 3rd time. So you are familiar to him now. He is a professor at Bethel University working in the Department of Political Science. So it's with him that we will debate this topic, economic development, the debate about the spirit of capitalism. And I want to just go straight to my guest to ask him how he's doing. How are you doing?
Doing very fine.
You're doing very fine.
Yeah, in spite of the coronavirus and pandemic.
Okay. So you followed what we said about our discussion of today. And my first question will be, what is the spirit of capitalism?
Okay, this is a very interesting question, and I want to appreciate the opportunity again to be invited here to participate in this discussion. And I just want the listeners to understand, or the viewers to understand, that this is a very important topic. Now, some of you may be the type that may be opposed to capitalism. Some of you may be the type that embrace it. But the reason why we're having this discussion about the spirit of capitalism is simply because we truly believe that it is the dominant economic system today. And even if you are one of those that think you want to change it, before you change it, we're advising you to pay some attention and understand it really very well before you can change it. So we're talking about economic development, and I would like to just begin by just giving an idea to the viewer what economic development is briefly. initially when people started talking about economic development, they think it is about growing the economy, let the economy grow. Because when the economy grows, then it is automatically assumed that the benefits of that economic growth would benefit all the people in the society. But as we know in Africa, and even probably in the United States, we have had times when the economy has grown. Nobody will doubt that. But when you look at the benefits to the people, you find out that poverty probably remained the same or has increased, unemployment has remained the same or has increased, and then inequality has also widened. So our expectation is that economic development will lead to the reduction or elimination of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. But sometimes it does not. So this is the vision of economic development, and capitalism is supposed to contribute to that development. So now, the spirit of capitalism. So if capitalism is going to contribute to economic development, what is this spirit of capitalism? Now again, for the viewer who is not familiar with this term, the term was originally formulated by somebody called Max Weber, who is a German scholar. And Max Weber, who wrote in the early 20th century, just thought that when he observed capitalism, he said, and he wrote a book titled The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. And indeed, he tried to argue that there's something that you can call the spirit of capitalism. And if capitalism in any society is going to succeed, it has to have that spirit. So let me just briefly say something about that spirit, and then we can continue. One, that spirit is that the people would have to be very disciplined. In other words, capitalism cannot take place without a disciplined labor force. The labor force has to be very disciplined. And then the workers or the organizers of the business have to be very rational. They have to be rational in the way they organize their business. And then the people have to be diligent. And what he means by diligent is that if the store is going to be open at 8 a.m., the store should be open. If the store is going to be closed at 8 p.m., if somebody comes there 5 minutes to 8, the shop should still be open, okay? So there's this kind of like diligence. People believe in hard work. They're very dedicated. They organize everything very rationally in order. There's predictability and all those kind of things. So hard work. But here is what makes it even interesting. The people who started this spirit of capitalism that Max Weber, the German scholar, was observing, he said, because of their hard work and dedication, remember that they are working very hard, they are very rational, they are very diligent, and amazingly, they were very successful, but when they make the money, they do not just go and spend it on a vacation. They reinvest it. When they make the money, they reinvest it, okay? So what that simply means is that capitalism is this rational system of making money. Rational in the sense that it's not money you're making by accident, but you're very diligent, you're very systematic in organizing everything, you have a disciplined labor force and all those kind of things. And then when you make the money, you don't just go and spend it one day, but you try to reinvest it. So this is what he refers to as the spirit of capitalism, because capitalism requires discipline in the workforce. It requires being rational and being oriented. It requires people to be diligent. And then if you want capitalism to succeed in your country, if you make the money, you are not just going to go and spend it or waste it. You have to reinvest it so that the business can expand.
Thank you very much. I have another question about the economic development. You said something catchy. You said the economic development is somehow, the spirit is that you have to increase, the economy should grow. Mm-hmm. But even if the economy grows, it doesn't mean everyone gonna benefit from that. Mm-hmm. So the question is, why then it is necessary, that spirit, why it is necessary if that is the case?
Okay, and this is, I'm glad you raised this issue because there are two things I would like to, points that I would like to say about it. The important point you're making is that, and I think every viewer or every listener should take this into consideration, that the spirit of capitalism can really contribute to economic growth, but it doesn't have any commitment to social justice. Okay? It doesn't have any commitment to social justice. And I think you can see very clearly in history that we have had situations where definitely capitalism or the spirit of capitalism has led to economic growth. The economy has grown, the productivity has increased, but in terms of the distributive justice, who gets what, or the fairness in the distribution, the spirit of capitalism doesn't have anything to say really about that. So this is kind of like the point you're making is an indirect critique of what Weber wrote. Because Weber was just concerned about this spirit of capitalism, that if capitalism is going to succeed, the workers have to be rational, they have to be diligent, they have to be very honest in whatever they do. There has to be honesty in that business, and when they make the profit, they should not just go and just spend it and waste it in terms of indulgent spending, but they should kind of like reinvest it, okay? Now, good, this is true. If you look at the capitalism, the way it has operated, even here in the United States, if you really want to make money, you cannot just go and be spending it. You make some money today, and then you just go and spend everything. You are not going to be able to grow your savings and things like that. So you need to be invested. But the spirit of capitalism doesn't say anything about distributive justice or fairness or justice in distribution. And I think if African countries or even countries in the United States or the Western world are going to really embrace this spirit of capitalism, they have to add to that the question of distributive justice. Who's going to get what and how? Now, talking about distributive justice doesn't actually mean that we're talking about socialism, because I know in the United States and other parts of the world, the moment you talk about fairness and justice, some people feel you're talking about socialism or communism. No. There are many countries in the Scandinavian countries that are rated very highly in terms of fairness in the distribution of wealth, and people are very happy there. But they are not socialist countries. It's just kind of like fairness in distribution.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. It's like Max Weber had described very well the spirit of capitalism. And you gave some of those descriptions, like people must be disciplined, rational, and so forth.
Yeah.
The question is, do we have other criteria or other elements which are not those we have in the society that can contribute to the spirit of capitalism?
Yes, and I'm glad that you raised, this is a very interesting and relevant question too, because when you read what Max Weber wrote, for instance, he would bring up issues like bookkeeping, accounting, okay? So accounting, in other words, if you're going to have a successful capitalist development, you have to have a very systematic way to keep records and have an accounting. Otherwise, you wouldn't know whether the business is making progress or not making progress. So that's another thing that is really very important. But when you broaden the discussion to just in general, infrastructure is very, very important. You cannot have economic development today if you do not have infrastructure. Okay, so I'm talking about infrastructure like electricity, efficient transportation system, and efficient communication system. All these things are really very, very important for economic development. So workers can be very rational. And I will say that if you go to African countries, you're going to find out that there are workers that are very diligent or whatever, but they may not have electricity, efficient electricity.
Keep talking.
They may not have efficient electricity, they may not have infrastructure and things like that. And all this will therefore affect the process of economic development. So what we are therefore saying is that if we're going to have economic development, as Weber said, it's not just enough to have the spirit of capitalism, but we have some of these things that are also very important.
Okay, like bookkeeping, right?
Bookkeeping, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Good, good, good. Yeah, I think this book is a very wonderful book, and many people have talked about it. And we are not here to promote the book, but I think it's important if someone wants to understand the spirit of capitalism. It is very important. It is very important to go through it and read and understand it. But we have more questions around the book. I know everyone doesn't agree with what Weber said, even though they can agree on some points and some perspective. But on others, they differ. And I don't like to get into that. But myself, I want to just keep asking questions about what we are talking right now, about the spirit of capitalism. So the question is the spirit of capitalism needed always for sustainable capitalism development in a society?
Okay, I appreciate you asking this question about sustainability, and I think this is also very important for those that are listening or watching. So what is sustainability? Sustainability in one way simply means that we consume resources in such a way that we are mindful of the fact that we are not the only people who are going to use it, but there are also people who are going to come behind us who are going to use these resources, okay? So that makes it sustainable. In other words, don't just use it as if you are going to be the last people in the society or the last people in the community who are going to use this, but use it in such a way that you are concerned about not only your lives, the lives of the people today, but the lives of future generations, okay? So if capitalism is going to be sustainable, or the spirit of capitalism is going to be sustainable, we are concerned not just about capitalism that is going to work for us, for instance, just in the United States, or just work in one country in Africa or in Asia or Latin America, and not just a capitalism or the spirit of capitalism that is going to make capitalism work just for people who are living today, but a capitalism that would also operate in such a way that it will take into consideration there are future generations, there are younger people who are coming, and we shouldn't use the resources in the world today as if we are going to be the last people. So again, the spirit of capitalism as it is doesn't have any clear commitment to sustainability. This is something that we have to add to it, because we have seen that there are many places where capitalism has been very successful in terms of economic growth, which I mentioned much earlier. But this economic growth was at great human cost. At great human cost, maybe not everybody was affected by that economic growth, but certain segments of the people in the society who are probably from the lower class, or probably people who are in the rural areas, have been really affected very, very much. For instance, if you're going to use the United States as an example, remember that the lives of Native Americans, their lives have been devastated because of the way capitalism expanded in this country. And this is it is all this experience that encouraged some scholars in the Western world to start thinking about, oh, we need to make capitalism sustainable. So if we want capitalism to be sustainable, it means our business people, our government, our leaders in the community will have to sit down and just say that, okay, we want our economy to grow, we want our economy to be productive, but we also do not want it to be destroying the environment in such a way that the environment will be so destroyed that some people are going to suffer and live in abject poverty. We will also think about how we can manage capitalist development so that future generations are not going to suffer because of the way we have misused resources. So this is something that is an ethical issue of concern. It's a moral issue of concern. And I think people would have to sit down on the table and say, okay, you can be rational in terms of the way you organize your capitalism, as Weber said. You can be diligent, and you can be very productive, okay? But still, even with this productivity, which will lead to economic growth, if there is no deliberate and intentional commitment to sustainable development, which means the way we use our scarce resources to benefit people fairly today and then to also benefit people in the future generation, we're going to be in trouble. So this is a very important question, and we need to...
Maybe I want to come back on a question on ethics. Mm-hmm. You said at one point that the spirit of capitalism wants to increase the economy. But there is this commitment of a fair distribution. But now I know in the West, they do believe, strongly believe, that this system is the one who can help poor people to come out of their poverty.
Mm-hmm.
They believe that, no question,
Yeah.
because they are applying it all over.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you say about this belief? Is this system the only one which can get out the people from poverty?
Okay, this is another very important question. And for the listener and the viewer who is not familiar maybe with the history of economic development, I would just put it in general this way.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after the Second World War, there was commitment for the state to intervene in the economy, to do quite a lot of things to help people who are poor. This happened both in the Western world, in Europe. Europe was devastated by the war, and even here in the United States. Here in the United States, people call it post-war prosperity, because there was relative agreement that the government should play an important role. So in the US, we had like the GI Bill and things like that, okay? Mm-hmm. Which was really very committed. And then subsequently after that, President Lyndon Johnson came up with the great war on poverty, on all those kind of things. So that was a commitment. But if you check the history of this country, you find out that from around late 1970s and particularly 1980s, when President Ronald Reagan came to power, and then when Margaret Thatcher came to power in Britain, there was an attempt to dismantle the welfare state, which was committed to reducing poverty or getting people out of poverty.
Yeah.
So, and you notice that from around 1980, from around 1980 to date, inequality started widening between the rich and poor in the United States beyond what it was before, okay? Because there were attempts by politicians, different kinds of politicians, to reduce the amount of money that is spent on social services, okay? They cut the budget, they cut taxes, and all those kind of things, okay? So even though there has been this commitment to eliminating poverty and getting rid of poverty in the Western world, even in the Western world, right now we are in an era where people just feel that people should just raise themselves by their bootstrap. Our welfare system has become very meager. We still have it, but we're still struggling. And I must say that I am commending those politicians from both sides of the aisles who have worked hard to make sure that still some programs have been kept in place to help people who find themselves stranded in this capitalist economy. Now, what about developing countries like in Africa or something like that? Well, in Africa, there was this attempt equally immediately after the Second World War, when African countries in the 1950s, late 50s and 60s became independent. There was this kind of like celebration of the state investing or intervening in the economy through the area of education, infrastructure, whatever, agriculture, just to help improve the living standards of people, right? Mm-hmm. But around the 1980s, there's an ideology, market ideology, that was imposed on many African countries, which says that the government is corrupt, the government is inefficient, so we should allow the market to distribute goods and services. So most of the services that were provided by the government were privatized. And when they were privatized, like healthcare and education and things like that, started being privatized, or the government started charging money. Now, I'm not here to say that the governments in Africa were not corrupt or the government elites were not corrupt. But at the same time, I will also tell you that the idea that the market in Africa, like, okay, let's be just efficient, let's get people out of poverty by just allowing things to happen in the market, demand and supply. If private businesses are allowed to provide things, then everything would be okay, everything would be available, there will be efficiency. That can be efficiency, but even if these services are available, it's not going to be, it's not a guarantee that everybody will be able to pay for that service. I just spoke to somebody in Nigeria, for instance, and they said to just go and get a consultation with a doctor, you need 5,000 naira. And 5,000 naira is a huge amount of money for most Nigerians, okay? So, and if you have a country where now the new policy is just that healthcare has been privatized, you have to have the money to get access to that, then it doesn't matter even if the economy is growing. If you don't have a job or the market just ignores you, it pushes you aside, because you remember that even if you have certain skills in the economy, if the market doesn't think the skills are the ones that are needed, the market is not going to take care of you or take you seriously. It will just ignore you. We know that even here in the United States, there are many people who want to be employed. They have certain skills, but maybe the market just doesn't care about their skills. So this kind of people are called surplus people. They are surplus because the market just doesn't care. They can exist, but the market doesn't care of them. So in this respect, therefore, I would say commitment to poverty is something that government in a country and the people have to be deliberate about that. And what I mean by deliberate is that they have to ask themselves, what is the purpose of our society? And when I say what is the purpose of our society, is the purpose of the society just to just have business and just for some people to get rich while others are poor? Or is the purpose of the society to create a balance? That we know that we're never going to be a society where everybody is equal, but we want a society where there would be bountiful opportunities for everyone, okay? So that nobody will be living in abject poverty. Poverty cannot just be assumed to be eradicated automatically just through the market. The market can help, but it has to be managed. But some people don't want the market to be managed. They say, just leave the market on its own. It will take care of itself. And that's where we are today.
Okay. It's very, very interesting. Yeah. And I suppose that Max Weber, when he came up with this theory of the spirit of capitalism, he started Christianity in Germany. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if the same spirit can be found in other religions beside Christianity.
Oh, you're asking very... This is a very interesting question. Actually, the question you raise is a question that some people pursued. And at the end of the day, they recognize that while Max Weber definitely opened a discussion on something that is really very important, but he was probably narrow-minded. Yeah. Okay, so Max Weber thought that this spirit of capitalism is only in Europe. Yeah, he said it is something unique to European society. But I must commend economic anthropologists because we have a discipline in the social sciences that is known as anthropology. So economic anthropologists studied what Weber said carefully. They said, well, if you dress down what Max Weber said about the spirit of capitalism, essentially what he's talking about is people's value system. He's saying that because all these things that we mentioned about the spirit of capitalism, being diligent, being honest, being very rational, whatever, all these are kind of value orientation or value system. So they said, essentially when you look at what Weber is saying, he's saying that capitalism cannot develop if people do not have a certain kind of value system. Value system is very important. This value system will shape the way people really acted. So he would argue that those people in Germany that he observed, the Calvinists, who had the spirit of capitalism, and remember that those people in Germany that he observed, they were not people who sat down around a table and said, oh, we are Calvinists and we're going to start the spirit of capitalism, we're going to bring capitalism into existence or something like that. No, what he was just saying was just that if you look at what capitalism requires, like capitalism requires people to be hardworking, to be diligent in their work, to be very rational in the way they organize their labor and all those kind of things. And he said, if this is what capitalism needs to develop, and you look at what these Calvinist people are manifesting because of their religious beliefs and attitudes, he said, actually, their value system is exactly the kind of value system that capitalism really needs to succeed. And that's why he called it the spirit of capitalism. Now, economic anthropologists, after understanding Weber that this is about the value system, whatever, they conducted studies in other cultures, in other societies.
Okay.
And one of the best examples, I think, is Indonesia by Clifford Geertz. Clifford Geertz is an American anthropologist, and he has this capacity to study culture in such a way that sometimes when he analyzes the culture to you, you feel like he has some spirits that are giving him inner revelation about how to interpret this culture. It's very fascinating when you read him. You know, I remember one graduate student at the University of Minnesota said, She doesn't seem to have this kind of gift that some of these anthropologists have to interpret culture in such a way that is so deep. But Weber, Clifford Gertz went to Indonesia. And when he went to Indonesia, he conducted some studies there of some people who are Muslims. They belong to a Muslim sect. And then there were studies also conducted in other countries about the Sikh people in India. There's a particular religious group in India called the Sikh. And when they studied them, they found out that actually these people are not Christians, but their value system is exactly the same that Weber talked about, the Calvinist spirit of capitalism. So this became a broader argument now that this spirit of capitalism is not just unique to Europe. If you're talking about diligence, you're talking about honesty, you're talking about hard work, you're talking about people not just spending their money just lavishly on just anything, but reinvesting it. All these kind of things, economic anthropologists found out that there are certain cultures in the world that have actually, or religious tradition or groups that have those kind of same things that Weber observed in Germany among the Calvinists.
Professor, if that is the case then, why other societies are not developed as Western societies?
Okay, good. I think this is again another interesting question. We go back and forth.
Yeah.
Okay, the point you're making here is a point that has been made by some economists who study economic development in developing countries, because you know the economic development or experience of advanced countries like the United States is kind of like different from developing countries, because when you go to my village, the way some of in Africa, the way some of the people really think there may not be like in the 21st century. Okay, okay, yeah. So then this then becomes a question of something that people call coordination failure. Coordination failure simply means, remember much earlier you asked a question and I said, apart from the spirit of capitalism, there are other things that you need, right, to develop, like infrastructure, right? You need infrastructure in the form of roads, electricity supply, and then communication system. You need an educational system. You need some kind of democratic, or maybe people being cosmopolitan. Cosmopolitan simply means if you're doing business, if I'm doing business, if you come from a different African country, I wouldn't say that, oh, Mr. Kisongo did not come from this part of Africa, so I'm not going to do business with him or whatever. Or if somebody comes from a different religious group, you say, oh, I'm not going to do business with him. So you need to have, for capitalist development to take place, people have to be cosmopolitan, to be open-minded in terms of interacting with all kinds of people.
Yes.
So what is missing in Africa is that even if you have the appropriate value system, the appropriate education or whatever, if some of these other things that are needed in order to make the system really work are not there, then capitalism is not going to develop. But more importantly also, and this is something that I want to stress, many African countries went through colonialism, right?
Yes.
And because they went through colonialism, and this is a huge topic, definitely there are certain challenges that they confront in terms of capitalist development that other countries that were not colonized probably may not have to deal with. So when you add to that this problem of coordination failure, where there are maybe 5 or 10 things that you need for capitalism to succeed in your country, but you just have 2, and there is nobody to coordinate all these things together and bring them together so that they will all work together. And so that would bring failure. So apart from this coordination failure, we also have the legacy of colonialism. But sometimes I think the legacy of colonialism is something that we need to recognize and understand, but then move beyond that. And why did I say that? In one of our previous discussions, I said that I studied Malaysia, okay? And Malaysia was colonized by the British. And there are other countries in Asia, like Singapore also was colonized by the British. But when you look at their level of development, frankly, they are doing better than many African countries, right?
Yes.
So while I recognize colonialism and its devastating consequences on Africa, we cannot just forever continue to talk about that. What we need to do is to understand what was the impact of colonialism, what are its legacy, and what can we do about that, and then move forward from there. So the coordination failure is what I will emphasize. And by coordination failure, I mean sit down and write, what do you need for capitalist development? Maybe you come up with 10 things that you need. And those 10 things have to be brought together. They have to work together, right? So who is going to bring this coordination coordinate all these things that are needed for effective capitalism to take place, whether in Africa, in Asia, or Latin America? Is it the government? Is it the market? Is it the private sector? Is it the community? Or is it all these different organizations like the state, the market, private business, and then community organizations? If all of them would have to contribute, then how are they all going to come and work together so that they will all contribute and help the process of capitalist development? If they cannot all work together and collaborate, and there's nobody to help them coordinate, then there's coordination failure.
Thank you. As we are going to the end of the show, I have maybe 2 more questions to ask, because this debate is very interesting.
Yeah.
So what lessons can we draw from this debate in the relationship to Africa? That is one question. And I don't know if I can give the second one so that you can respond to both at the same time. Mm-hmm. The second will be, what critiques do you have concerning this debate or this book that we are talking about?
Okay, so let me start with the first one. How is this debate relevant for Africa, right?
Yes.
This is, again, a very important question. We don't have the time to get into these details. But here is what I would like to say about it. Weber is really right that for capitalism to really take place, modern capitalism to take place, there are certain things that we call prerequisites. Okay, prerequisites means things that you really need to have for something to really function very well. So one way to answer this is a question that I have asked many people in Africa, or I have communicated to many people in Africa. I said, look, as Africans, you have the right to choose whether you want to be part of the modern world. And you know capitalism is part of the modern world, right? Mm-hmm. So you can be in Africa or Latin America or whatever. Theoretically, you might say you have the right to choose whether you want to be part of the modern world and be part of modern capitalism. Or you might say that I'm going to go back to the culture of my ancestors of 6,000 years. You have the right to do that, okay? Now, you may say that, no. I love the culture of my ancestors, but I see something of value in this modern world or modern capitalist economy, right? Mm-hmm. That I still want, and I want to be part of it. Okay, you still have the right to do that. So you can talk about an African modernity, or you can talk about something that has to do with you're trying to synchronize different systems, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Western system of capitalism and then the traditional African culture or whatever. But the important thing is that whenever you decide, you have to ask yourself, what are the minimum requirements? What are the minimum requirements for capitalism to really take place? Okay? Okay, what are the minimum requirements? What are the things that you really need? And then once you ask yourself what are the minimum requirements and you identify them, then your government should start working on trying to bring these things together. Because it's just like you immigrate to the United States. You may love the culture of your country, but I would say that if you want to succeed in America, you have to ask yourself, what are the minimum requirements for you to be active and to be successful in America, right?
Yeah.
Even though you come from Africa, you love your African culture or any culture, but you still have to ask yourself. And I think that's a fair question. If I want to live here, I have to ask myself, what are the minimum requirements I need in order to function effectively here? And once I know them, then I say, let me work on trying to get these minimum requirements. So in this respect, if we in Africa want to become part of the modern world and have modern capitalist development, we will definitely have to examine our culture, the way we do our work. We have to look at our institutions. We have to look at the kind of infrastructure that we have. We have to look at the way we build our cities. We have to look at our educational institutions. All these things will have to change so that we can create a minimum requirement for us to be active players in the modern capitalist system.
Okay.
Okay.
Before you go to the second question I asked, there is someone who is on the phone.
Okay.
He wants to ask you a question.
Okay.
So Please ask your question.
Thank you so much, Professor.
We cannot hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
No, the voice is just, the sound is just low, very low.
Okay, can you hear me?
Okay,
Can
hold
you hear
on.
me?
Maybe it's on our side. Let us check something.
Okay.
Now I can hear you, yeah?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Professor, thank you to be here today.
Yeah.
Speaking of the new spirit of capitalism, what criticism do you make of the alienation of everyday life by the alliance of capital and bureaucracy? This is the first question. The second question, what are the additional critique of capitalism that you can identify?
Okay. So
That's it.
So
Okay, thanks.
So the first question is about bureaucracy?
Yeah, bureaucracy and critique.
Yeah. You want me to repeat it again? I can repeat it.
Okay, repeat it again because I'm not
Okay.
hearing very well.
I said, speaking of the new spirit of capitalism, what the criticism do you make of the alienation of everyday life
Okay.
by the alliance of capital and bureaucracy? The second question, what are the additional critiques of capitalism that you can identify?
Okay.
Okay. So the first question is about the alienation of capitalism, the alienation that capitalism really brings and things
Correct.
like that. And you are making a very important point because in the first place, Karl Marx really talked about that. Okay, he raised about the consequences of capitalism, and many people didn't like what he said because he's supposed to be a socialist, a communist, or whatever. But here is one of the criticism of how capitalism can bring alienation, and this is why we didn't get into that because we're very short on time, and I don't want to just expand the discussion very broadly. But I'm glad that you brought this up because Max Weber himself, and I noticed that in the United States, when people hear the term, the book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, they feel very excited. They feel like, because generally, traditionally, America is considered to be, the United States is considered to be a Protestant country, so they feel like, yes!
We are there.
Yeah. But when you read the book very carefully, and when you read the work of Max Weber very carefully, he said, the problem with capitalism is it leads to what he calls the process of rationalization. So what is this process of rationalization? This process of rationalization means you increasingly become concerned about cost-benefit analysis. Cost-benefit analysis. And when you are concerned about cost-benefit analysis, what ends up really happening is just that you are concerned about efficiency. Efficiency. Now, the problem that Weber saw is that a capitalist system can be efficient, but it can still alienate human beings. And he thought that the crisis that Western civilization is going to go through because of this pursuit of efficiency, because he didn't see any end to this pursuit of efficiency. He didn't see any end to it in a capitalist society. And if you've been in the United States for quite some time, you notice that it's always about efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about robotic technology, all those kind of things. So Weber, at one point he said, the future of humanity in the Western world is going to be an iron cage, not a Garden of Eden. Now he's using the Garden of Eden metaphorically as if it was this kind of period of creation where people were very happy or something like that. So to your credit, you brought up this issue, and Weber really took note of it. Okay, so if we are going to have capitalism not alienating people and not leading to this iron cage, then we have to sit down, as I said, Matt, earlier, to sit down around a table and talk about social justice, right? How can we bring justice and fairness? Because even if capitalism is efficient, it doesn't necessarily mean efficiency is going to lead to the benefit of every person in society. And we have seen some elements of that in the United States where sometimes capitalism is so efficient, but there are many people, whether white, left over, okay? So this is true. You raise a very important question. But the problem here in the United States or in other parts of the world is when you begin to raise the kind of question that you raise here, some people feel like you just hate capitalism, you're just for socialism, or you're just for communism. But I think we can sincerely talk about this in terms of balance. You need to have efficiency in your system, but how can you have efficiency in such a way that it doesn't dehumanize other people? It doesn't treat other people as if they are just some kind of means to somebody's ends rather than having their own ends. So that's my response to the first question. And then the second question is just the general critique of capitalism. As such.
Yeah.
This is really...
And that also joined my question about the critics. So respond
so
together.
Again, you raise a very important point about this, because Weber himself said that if capitalism just continues like this, cost-benefit analysis, you're always trying to pursue profit, everything, efficiency, okay? And Weber has had no doubt, even Karl Marx had no doubt that capitalism would be efficient. For anybody listening to this who is not familiar with the work of Karl Marx, if they assume that Karl Marx did not believe in the efficiency of capitalism, they are making a mistake. Actually, in the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx said that the bourgeoisie in capitalist society have within 100 years accomplished what previous generations have not been able to achieve in 1,000 years. Okay? So the issue of capitalism for Marx and for both Marx and Weber is not whether capitalism is efficient or not. The question is the question of justice for Karl Marx, and for Max Weber, the question of meaning in life. So what is the meaning of life? And sometimes I ask people this question. We have all this productivity in American society. We want to increase technology, efficiency, or whatever. So at the end of the day, where are we going to? What is the ultimate destination? Where is this taking us to? Okay? And W.W. Rostow wrote a book called The 5 Stages of Economic Growth, a Non-Communist Manifesto. He said the highest stage of capitalism, and he's an American, he said the highest stage of capitalism is the age of high mass consumption. Okay? So some of you listening to this are very religious people. You may be a Christian, you may be a Muslim, you may be whatever. But so think about it. Whatever your tradition is, but let me use the Western tradition in this respect. So all this civilization and discussion, erudite scholarship, from Socrates throughout in the BC period, throughout to today, the whole purpose of life is just to reach the age of high mass consumption. Oh my God. You just feel like there's something missing. And you are right, Weber raised this important question. So he recognized the spirit of capitalism, but he was also concerned that if you just continue pursuing capitalism the way it is like that, you are going to run into the problem of meaninglessness. Some immigrants who are hearing this will know that before you came to the United States, you feel like it is going to be a paradise or something like that. Or it is when you come here, then you realize how many hours do you work or whatever. You go to work today, you go to work tomorrow or whatever. You have all these bills to pay or whatever. So this is it. So there's no paradise on earth. Okay. So to conclude, what I will just say is just that if we're going to engage in any discussion of capitalism, okay, whether it is from the point of view of Max Weber, his discussion of the spirit of capitalism or whatever, we have to bring into discussion the question of justice and fairness, which means we have to bring this question of ethics and morality. The problem today in America and in many other societies, like Milton Friedman said, he was at the University of Chicago before, he said, forget about the question of bringing ethics and morality into discussion of economic development, because whose morality or whose ethics are you going to bring into the discussion? We are divided. So you say, just put your morality and ethics aside, allow the market to operate freely, and then if you like, if you make 100 billion, go and donate all the money to the poor. He doesn't have a problem with that. But don't bring your morality and ethics into discussion about how the economy is going to be managed. This is the crisis that we have today, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world. Should we just leave the economy, the capitalist economy, just to the market only? Or should we bring some ethical and moral discussions about how we can make the system more fair and just for everyone? But if we're going to do that, whose morality and whose ethics?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Zalanga. And I think it's with those words we are closing our show for today. But I will ask you if you have a last word to recommend to people, our listeners, or people who are listening you from Africa? If you have some recommendation you can make.
You mean recommendation in terms of a book or what?
No, not a book, but just practice what we should be doing.
Okay, I think there's something I'm going to say. For the listener, whoever is listening, I just want you to know that I grew up in the northeastern part of Nigeria, and it is the most backward part of the country. I grew up poor. I don't hide it to anybody. My parents were poor. I used to be selling things by the side of the street. My mother would cook some food, and I would sell it around the street and things like that. So this is where I came from. But given my age now, and given the opportunities I have in life, I just want to tell you that even if you give me the whole of the Twin Cities to be my own, knowing the suffering and the pain that some people are going through in Africa, and they are human beings created with human dignity, I don't feel happy about that. So it's not about me getting a big car to drive, a big house to live in, this and that, or Samuel Zalanga having a big name or whatever. The question is, what is my life going to do to contribute to the least advantaged person, whether here in the United States or in Africa? This is the agenda that I want all of us to be committed to. Otherwise, the way I see it, I am already beginning to feel frustrated that I am going to die without seeing Africa being where I expected it to be when I was an undergraduate student. Because it seems like everybody is just concerned about himself, herself, or my ethnic group, or my this, or whatever. No nation in Africa can develop if there is no generation or group of leaders who will say, life is not just about me, or just about my enjoyment, or it is not just about now. A time is going to come when all of us are going to die. So we have to ask ourselves, what is going to be our legacy? What are we going to do, not just for ourselves now, but for future generation? Okay, I migrated to the United States, but some people had to do something to make this place attractive for me to come, right? I know that. If the country was, there are many countries in the world, but I didn't migrate to those countries, right? Let's be frank about it. I decided to come here. So what are we going to do to make Africa a better place for the least advantaged people in that society? Thank you very much.
I think it's very clear, and you have been working about that. So thank you very much for talking about the spirit of capitalism. I think everyone got something from this debate and discussion. And now I promised that at the end of this, I'm going to go back to my French listeners to give them the resume, the essential of the discussion. So I want to go there and tell them what we said. Comme je l'ai dit au départ, nous avons dit que nous allons revenir à la fin pour donner le résumé ou encore l'essentiel de notre discussion cet après-midi. On a parlé sur le développement économique, le débat sur l'esprit du capitalisme. C'était ça le thème. Et notre invité nous a expliqué qu'est-ce que c'est l'esprit du capitalisme. Il a dit qu'il y a un auteur, un savant allemand qui a travaillé là-dessus et il est appelé Max Weber. Max Weber a écrit un livre qui a généré beaucoup de débats sur l'esprit du capitalisme. Mais l'essentiel de ce qu'il a dit, il a dit que l'esprit du capitalisme s'explique par la discipline d'abord. Donc, il faut être discipliné pour avoir cet esprit. Deuxièmement, il faut être rationnel, c'est-à-dire la rationalité. Troisièmement, il faut être très engagé. Quatrièmement, il faut vraiment travailler dur, parce qu'en faisant ces choses, vous allez croître votre économie, ou ce que nous appelons le développement économique. Mais avec cela, il y a aussi d'autres facteurs qu'il n'a pas donnés, mais qui sont aussi importants. Parce qu'il ne faut pas tout simplement produire, mais il faut savoir comment les choses se passent. On a parlé de bookkeeping, c'est-à-dire il faut une comptabilité qui est assainie pour savoir ce qui se passe dans tout cela. Et malheureusement, avec cet esprit, il y a ce que notre invité a critiqué, c'est le mal, qu'est-ce qu'il faut dire ici? Il faut dire que c'est le problème de l'injustice sociale dans la distribution des biens. Vous pouvez beaucoup produire, mais ces biens-là ne sont pas socialement ou équitablement distribués dans la société et cela pose des problèmes. Ça, c'est un. Et de deux aussi, il ne faut pas conclure que parce que nous avons un développement économique, tout le monde sera bien. Parce que les autres qui ont accru leur économie ou qui ont fait le développement économique, ils se sont mis aussi à investir. C'est-à-dire, il faut investir, même si vous avez des surplus, comme on peut le dire, il ne faut pas les consommer, il faut plutôt l'investir pour créer des emplois. Mais il ne faut pas oublier cet aspect important de la distribution qui doit être efficace, distribution des biens dans toute la société pour que les gens sortent de la pauvreté. Donc, sortir de la pauvreté, ce n'est pas l'affaire d'une seule personne. Il faut qu'il y ait les gouvernements, qu'il y ait aussi la population. Tous doivent travailler en collaboration pour arriver à des résultats qui sont palpables, des résultats qui sont bénéfiques pour tout le monde. Et il a donné d'autres exemples, mais avant de faire cet esprit de capitalisme, il faut faire un choix. Parce que les gens aujourd'hui peuvent se décider de dire non, nous ne voulons pas entrer dans l'économie moderne. C'est possible. Et d'autres peuvent dire non, nous apprécions beaucoup l'économie ancestrale, mais nous voulons aussi l'économie moderne. Comme ça, ils vont combiner. C'est-à-dire, il faut faire un choix pour arriver à l'économie moderne. Il faut revoir notre culture, il faut revoir nos institutions, il faut revoir la façon dont nous construisons nos cités, il faut revoir nos systèmes éducationnels et ainsi de suite. Si nous faisons cela, nous mettons un pavement sur le chemin du capitalisme moderne qui va apporter les bénéfices à tout le monde. Mais il faut aussi reconnaître, même si nous disons l'esprit du capitalisme est bon pour nous faire sortir de la pauvreté, mais il faut aussi reconnaître que cet esprit a ses faiblesses. Cet esprit a ses faiblesses. Et il n'est pas trouvé tout simplement dans la religion chrétienne, mais cet esprit est aussi trouvé dans d'autres religions. C'est-à-dire, il faut tout simplement les mettre en application pour voir nos sociétés s'améliorer. Voilà un peu l'essentiel de ce que nous avons dit aujourd'hui, mais le débat reste ouvert. Il faut lire les livres pour mieux comprendre le reste. Donc, c'est avec ces notes que nous voulons conclure cette émission aujourd'hui. Et nous disons grand merci à tous ceux-là qui sont venus écouter ce débat. Et je pense que vous avez profité de quelque chose. Back to English, my listeners, I'm very thankful for watching this show today, and I think you have benefited something from what Professor Samuel Zalanga was telling us about the spirit of capitalism. What is left is just us to apply those criteria or those conditions to make our life better. It cannot be perfect, but at least move from poverty to decent life. Thank you for listening, and bye-bye for today.
nouveau à Minneapolis, Tempo Afrique Travel. Vous voulez voyager? Achetez vos billets d'avion à l'agence de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, pas de problème de connexion, pas de problème de transfert de vol. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, c'est le voyage en toute tranquillité, en toute beauté, de votre maison jusqu'à votre destination. Votre satisfaction est notre plaisir.